Ehud LFG asks, have you ever spoken about your role in some of the EQ expansions and how those experiences inform what you're doing in this game? Probably too much. People are probably tired of hearing it. What are some things you're most proud of from your time working on EQ, and which of those things might you do differently? Particularly interested in Pop and Luckland, as those were such transformative expansion. I mean, at the time, you know, I would say one of the things I'm proudest of, and I can't take any form of sole credit for it. I think it was just kind of the thing at the time, but there's a lot of discussion about just how to move different things forward, how to push encounters to be more interesting and involved, and use space better, and positioning, and have maybe a little bit more forethought in terms of intention with regards to mechanics. And yeah, so there's a lot of pushing the envelope in different areas, and we introduced a lot of more standard mechanics during that period that now we're, with this game, trying to sort of look at and see if that was the right direction. Like the Cursed Wraith Council fight. The guy that did the fight, I mean, you got to realize the last 4 planes before time, and then time itself was at the end of the expansion, also at the end of beta, in terms of like ability to tune them and test them and all of that, and we didn't necessarily have a perfect system. So and I think one of the other challenges was the guy that had the council fight also had the Burtox fight, well, basically Plane of Earth, also had Plane of Disease, also had Plane of Water, also had something else. So, no, okay, you guys liked it. I've had a number of people come in, like, bitch and moan. So, oh, cool, I'm glad you liked it. What was I doing? Fragments, cool. Got these in. Size of the world and travel really changed in Luckland and Pop. Yeah, it definitely was kind of, it definitely felt a bit like the final straw on that front. We were already distributed across Kunark and Velius, depending on kind of what your intent was. So you had a player base distributed across 2 continents, and then boom, up to the moon. And while Kunark wasn't fully featured, I guess, for non-XR, there's still enough there that you could be relatively self-sustaining. And the itemization approach, while it didn't completely invalidate the old world, it definitely made it where you were pretty highly encouraged to go to Kunark, and then Velius did the same thing. And Velius was more self-sustaining when you look at like Thurgadin and Kale, etc. And then once you're even further divided into space, and have the teleporters, the wizard, or having the like combine spires to use, then so then by the time Pop came around, it was actually meant to try to address the problems that we were already seeing by midway through Luckland with regards to the old world just being deserted. Yeah, everybody comes in and says POC books were like a drastic change. So I don't know, maybe I need to stop. Maybe I need to stop explaining why we did it, because maybe I'm high, or I just don't understand the game or whatever. But because everybody's like, oh my God, it just made it so easy to get around the world that wasn't being used. What did it do to the game? I was spending all day making thousands of plat off of transporting newbies everywhere in the old world during Luckland. And then you guys ruined my business. And I don't know. Again, maybe I'm completely full of shit. I really wish I had access to like my old documentation and spreadsheets and all that stuff, because we sat there during Pop and we're just looking around and going, man, the old world is like empty, and we still have new people coming in regularly, but they were distributed across, whatever it was at the time, like dozens of servers. Even if we said like preferred server or whatever, still likely distributed across a number of servers. And then how many starting cities, and how many and what was the average level of an individual during that period. And if you're like, oh, but what about the twinks, like how many twinks were just running around in the old world, and for how long? I mean, because a lot of twinks like knew how to hitch a ride and get somewhere. So It was during a period where everybody's talking about this new experience, massively multiplayer online games where there's thousands and millions of players that you can see, and then people would log in and be like, oh, I'm here for the other players, and then it would just be empty. And, you know, it was fun. One of my most memorable experiences was traveling with another player overnight. Like, we played all night and traveling from Kanos to Freeport with absolutely no idea of, like, how to get there. I'm not sure if we even had the maps printed out or whatever at that point. I was a warrior, and so I didn't have a bind the whole time. I was with a cleric who could bind himself in different zones, and he actually like sacrificed himself once or twice to like train shit away from me so that I could make it to the zone line. And, you know, it was a badass experience. And yeah, we don't want to deprive people of that. But the problem was, like, people were coming into the game and there was nobody else for them to go running with. So if they wanted to go meet their friend that was a dwarf in Caladim or something, then they might be traveling from wherever. Even from like Rivervale to Caladim would be a very different feeling experience than when we first started playing. The POC books were probably necessary, but they fixed an issue that should have never existed. Welcome to reality. Welcome to reality. Yes. That's why I like the M&M approach, that cities will always be home to players. We're going to try, but reality may decide that doesn't work, or we may screw it up somewhere along the way. It's always interesting. Like, hindsight is a hell of a drug. Will deep races, elves, dwarves, gnomes start in Night Harbor, or will there be a starter city in the deep? Well, for now, they'll start in Night Harbor because everybody's going to. But over time, they'll have their own cities. If you get to a point M&M feels too crowded content-wise in the original lands, and you do decide to do a moon expansion, a single portal through shouldn't phase anyone. No different than regular zoning at that point. Yeah, I think a part of it too is less about the portal and more about the... I mean, sure, yeah, it creates a situation then where you're not necessarily navigating the old world via multiple portals. So sure. But then the question winds up being less worried about navigation than I'd be worried about the fragmentation of the player base over time, especially if it's got low level zones and stuff. I think that's been one of the other problems. Ehud, yeah, no worries. I appreciate that. No, and I don't know that we need a POC command. I'm just, like I said, I'm grumpy today, so it probably comes out more smartass or whatever than ultimately intended, or maybe it's coming out as intended and I'm just being a smartass, so apologies. I think the challenge is when we look at expansions, if it's a new location and there's a decision made to have a new player race at that location, it kind of screws things a bit. When you put everything that you need for a player basically from 1 to, you know, when you put the entire leveling experience from level 1 to whatever in game in the new expansion, so that the Ixar or the Bashir or whatever new race can basically have that full experience up there, then it's either going to be pretty exactly comparable to the other player experiences, so that you're not encouraging players from other areas to just go there because it's the best path forward. Or if everybody's up there and it's the most exciting thing, then you're going to see kind of an encouragement of that anyway. And then you just wind up seeing the player segmentation over time. Yeah, exactly. BDC Retro said distance zones expansions should avoid having the amenities of home to force players coming back. It was bad in EQ when people started a newbie city and saw no players because everyone was in space. Yeah, I mean, it turned out to be that way, right? In their defense, I think another thing that people forget when they analyze decisions that were made in the early expansions was, I don't think it was till roughly somewhere around Luckland that the company even understood that the game was going to last for more years. The game was originally made with this idea that it would probably be around for like a year, and then people would get bored and go to some other game, or the new, EQ2 would be on its way out or whatever. And so you just see it with, you see it with itemization. You see it with a lot of decisions. It was just, hey, this new expansion's awesome. Why is everybody going to buy it? Because all the gear is awesome. Not only is it new content, but look, oh my god, the numbers are so much bigger and they have clickies on them now and all that stuff. right? So where was I there when EQ2 talk started up? When did they formally start thinking need a sequel to a game? It's my understanding, based off interviews and reading interviews, that they had already decided that there needed to be a sequel to the game before I was even on the team. So it seemed like it was in the works almost immediately. But I think that's, you know, it's one of the challenges too with making games and looking at the hindsight that you know, is in theory here. You guys are staring at a database for no reason, when you could be staring at some pretty stuff over here. You know, when decisions are made based on hindsight, one of the things that it's got to be helpful, whether people are looking at EQ or Dayoc or WoW or whatever, is like factoring in all of the sort of thought that was going on at the time, right? And sort of the misconceptions that were happening at the time. EQ cities were not designed to keep players in their home city, just starting hub. Wonder if when they did expansions, they added content to existing zones that would have added value. The challenge was adding content to the zones as expansions. Yeah. I think there could have been a lot of opportunity to just rework the cities. I mean, there's a lot of space even in the original like Freeport redesign or whatever. There's a lot of room in those cities to add more content. One of the goals with Lost Dungeons of Norath was just to go back and put content in the old world. So if we didn't have to make expansions, if we could have just focused instead of making expansions, if we could have just focused on the live operations of the game and put all of our resources there, then I think it would have been, an interesting opportunity. As Phantom Rogue said, at that time, games as a service didn't exist. Like the understanding of potential approaches to live operations just wasn't there. I'll try to hit on specific topics that are in there, especially self-serving ones. Cold-Blooded said, people forgot just how groundbreaking innovative EQ actually was. Nobody could have predicted how it would have changed the landscape. Yeah, I will accept that. But I will say that, so I think maybe when I've described the whole didn't realize the game was going to last thing, I maybe am misframing that, because I do think by the time a lot of us got on the team, we were already saying, hey, this game could last forever. This could be a virtual world. This could be a place that people stay in forever. But we weren't savvy enough as developers and professionals to be able to make that case and sell it. Like I think I've said a million times, I was just an aggro elitist asshole a lot of the time. What, you're not playing EQ 27 hours a day? Well, then I don't even want to hear your opinions. Do you even know about gaming, dude? Ugh. Right? So I was that guy for a long time, and I missed a lot of opportunities to actually maybe see some of those answers, right? Because we even had a studio head who's a smart guy. He's gone on to do great shit. He led the Sims franchise for years, right? And he was pushing a lot of stuff that would have actually probably addressed some of the city things we've talked about. He is very focused on making more casual content and making the world feel more like a world. I mean, he eventually went and worked on The Sims, for God's sake. So if we had listened to him instead of going, what do you know, man? Have you been rated? Right? Like, then we might have been able to pull our heads out of our asses on some of those decisions and make a better game long term, right? You know, it's just like, if you're not playing the game every 5 minutes of your entire waking life, dude, then you don't have an opinion that matters. Why are you even saying stupid shit? Get out of my face. Some of the team members actually even labeled our office that was, what was it? The sarcastically labeled an office that like 4 of us were in, the office of elite game designers. Because it was just like, the attitude was a bit much, I think. And who were those guys? The guys that labeled us as such? It was a crew of folks that were really into world building, really into trade skills, really into RP, really into, right? Like, is all this stuff that we're just like, dude, that's not even what EverQuest is about. EverQuest is about kill shit, take their shit, kill bigger shit, get even bigger shit, kill bigger shit. So yeah, that was the prevailing sort of attitude within a few of us that I think ultimately led to the game maybe not being as good as it could have been longer term. But hey, it's still around, so I guess we did something all right. Vrombro said, hey Sean, weird thing I've been thinking about a lot. Imagine MMO with just one single castle and the entire game takes place in and around it, like Castlevania. Why don't more MMO devs value smaller, high quality, denser worlds, like a huge magical castle or something like that? I think it's just, there's not a ton of MMO devs that are making smaller MMOs, and so maybe one of them will. And the question, I don't know, maybe the question is why aren't there more people out there that value it? If there are more people that are out there going, hey, you know what, I just want a castle with a lot of detail, then maybe people would make it. So there may not be a market for it, or there could be a badass market for it. Everfest said, one thing I do miss in modern MMOs is the smallness of the dungeon pathways. Everything now is huge, like a cavern is 100 feet tall. Takes the realism away from it. Yeah, and some of that has to do with just making shit feel epic. And then the other bit of it has to do with maybe camera decisions. Is the camera pretty pulled back because it's very actiony? Does the game play more like an ARPG, or does it play like, you know, a dungeon crawler? I don't know. Dargit says, just listen to your hearts, man. The vision the team has articulated showed their implementation of so far is amazing. Hype to the max. Well, that's very kind of you. Eldon was amazing on Zek. I finally got good gear from grouping without the fear of getting rolled over by a group of dark elves, trolls, and ogres. Yeah, well, but that's how we broke it on Zek, if you ask other people. Really enjoyed Eldon dungeons as well. Dungeon crawls are fun. Something that's hard to get sometimes in non-instance content. I'll be honest, I felt like the dungeon crawls, to me, even though they were lower production values than like dungeon crawls and WoW, I don't know, I kind of enjoyed the fact that it felt more freeform and I wasn't just being pulled on rails. And we could explore and bust open stuff and blah, 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 you know, like decurse boxes and all of that. So, you know, because somebody said something brilliant about WoW, the feeling of WoW dungeons. Oh, I think it was maybe on like an Asmongold video or something recently. I forget what they called it. Oh man, there's a great term for it. Shit. I'll have to look at my search history or something and see if I can, or view history and see if I can find it. But it was just like this very pithy little way of summarizing. It was something like not a loot train. It was something like, it was basically something with loot. It was just like getting pulled through an experience with loot, or I forget what they said. Especially when it was, once people sort of optimized and it's just like, oh, don't fight that. We're going to run by this and this and this, and we're going to get to that. And it's just like, no, not a loot goblin. But it was something like, you know, maybe I was tapping into the theme park feel or something. Like a carnival ride with loot or something. Stabity13 says, oh man, you would have gotten along with my 15-year-old self. Probably. I probably still would. I've never outgrown being a teenager. Zombucket said, world feeling like a world, ironically, is what I've always loved about EQ. Early EQ anyway. I've not played the recent last 10 years stuff. Yeah, I don't know what the newest stuff feels like, but I do realize, because we kind of realized that at the time that we were on a certain path and not necessarily going back and honestly capable of, or whatever, reinforcing the world sense. Nicodemus says, I can remember before EQ playing Quake and making an offhand comment to my programmer friend saying, if I can make a D&D game in this kind of game engine, and he said, where are you going to find the time to do that for that? It's funny because that's how I found Everquest. I was retelling that story to, I think, like VGFX the other night. I was playing Quake and I was like, hey, is there an environment like this? I was in a match with another player and we stopped shooting each other. I was like, is there a 3D environment like this? It's like D&D, like an RPG. And that's when they told me about Everquest. Looks like you're using item sizes. Are you going with race size specific items? Big Man asked. I think we've been on the fence. In the past, we've talked about maybe going that route, but having a fairly easy means of resizing certain things just for flavor. But if we were to just like make a decision rashly and pick one, then we'd probably go with no. But it's we need to have item size in here for containers more than we need it for whether or not a race can wear it, right? So this can indicate whether or not whether or not the bag's useful. Later on when I'm reviewing this quest implementation, after having not just quickly written it and then also implemented it, I may rename some of the shit because I got the feeling it just feels a little internally inconsistent. It seems like one of those things that makes sense but results in more development time and player annoyance. The development time may be minimal, player annoyance, I don't know, maybe. I think it's just really one of those things we need to sit down and say how much we really do or don't care. And with some of the things where we're not necessarily like very passionate from any one direction on the team on it, I think there's also a tendency to be like, well, why bother? Asking when we're going to see bows, and Pat has said already mocked up 2 quick ones based on the ones Goblin's class design. They just aren't hooked up to the data. Dargit said, I love camping, don't get me wrong, but dungeon crawls are also really fun. Eldon and classic wild dungeons are some of my favorite forms of content. Yeah, there's absolutely a place in the world for them. I always like those situations in EQ where the dungeon is a dungeon that you camp in, right? But because it was low population or no one was in there yet and you're breaking to a camp or whatever, like the process of fighting to a camp, you know, early Guck days, and just that act of like working through the bedroom and just getting to where you're going to set up. There was something really fun about that mix of getting there and then getting set up and then that being the camp for a while, right? And moving through those zones. And I think there were a number of dungeons that with some itemization revisions and maybe some slight content modifications and stuff like that would have been known for being even more fun zones. And maybe I'm just showing my ignorance on some of it. Like I said, I'm very guilty of not being able to speak to EQ anymore. It's been a long time, but at the time, like I ate, slept, breathed EQ. Honest. But yeah, and so I think about even when Jasmine and I played and we were in Split Paw and we were in the prison area. Imagine if Split Paw got some love and that area was actually just more interesting. And all those people that are sitting around soloing or doing the pillars and grabbing gnolls and stuff out there would be popping in there pretty regularly or talking, you know, in Karana more about like, hey, we got enough people to get this group to go in there and hit one of these wonderful camps that are in there. It's just loved calling out camps and asking Zona if anyone had a certain camp and how people were open about responding. Yeah, it was cool. I noticed that, but there's also not a ton of people playing on Friends and Family. So I'll be very curious in open play tests, maybe ones where people have leveled up a bit. If we start to see some of that zone talk. It's been, it was nice popping in last night before bed, just to move my tune and bank some stuff. And running into a person I knew, but then running into a person I was like, I don't know if I know them. That was nice. I couldn't get into Mythic dungeons. Mythic Plus dungeons are my kryptonite. Takes the worst parts of dungeon runs and emphasizes them to the extreme. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to speak for the team on this. I'm going to express my opinion pretty clearly on that front. I don't like it. I don't like the pressure. I don't like the attitude that comes with some of the, you know, that level of just, I don't know, game knowledge or skill or whatever you wanted to describe it as. I don't like it. And I'm not trying to shit on anybody that's their jam, dog, but like, it's not fun to me. And, you know, I'm a fairly self-conscious person, right? So as a relatively self-conscious person who's maybe just hopping in and playing suboptimally and chatting with my wife or looking at some shit on another monitor, like watching you guys, right? Which has basically been every stream I've done playing P99 or EQ or Eminem or whatever, right? Like I'm too distracted. I can barely enter data in a database while chatting with you guys, and I'd like to chat with you. But I like being in the environment. I like you know, I like those times when I am focused. I love camping stuff, and I like being around the other players, and I'm not trying to take anything away from those people that is their thing, where they get a supreme amount of satisfaction from being the best. You know, the world needs those people to some degree. But I'm very concerned, you know, the idea of making M&M a place where that's kind of, those are the people that we think we're attracting. Like, to me, that would be concerning, because I do believe, based on my limited engagement and experience with MMOs over the years, I do believe that there's a market for a product that is punishing when you screw up, that does require you to learn the game, right? Like, it's not holding your hand to tell you, you know, where everything is, and you do have to do some work or get on the wiki, but it's also a place where you can be non-Mythic Plus and fit in and have shit to do and be able to play the game and not be like constantly sweating if you're playing suboptimally in some way or another, like, you know. And I would say that the people that are so hardcore that they're like, boom, 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 need more game, you know, need number to go up. I think it's probably healthier in a lot of these games for, you're either making a game for those people, or you're making a game where those people can eventually kind of fall off the edge. They're leading edge, but there is an edge, because it's very difficult to balance across the full range of player types and segments. And as I say that, like, keep in mind, I know that we've got some really skilled people and friends and family already. I am not referencing any of you, especially the ones that, I mean, people are very helpful and people are very encouraging. People, you know, I love the people that are like leading edge and kick ass and highly skilled. But they're also probably the first one to grab somebody and be like, hey, I'll help you through this dungeon, or hey, we'll carry you. And because they're excited to show you the game, they're excited for you to get, you know, even if you're never going to get sort of their level of experience or their level of skills, they're excited for you to be a part of things and like showing you around and stuff like that. Because I do think like there are probably like elite people that are just straight, all they care about is being elite. But I think there's a lot of elite people that realize that what makes them elite is that they have skills and experience that other people don't. And if you just shit on everybody that doesn't have your experience, then you're no longer elite. You're just the only people in the game. Christian Mustard said, going back to the comment about dungeons being big to feel epic, I would rather have the old school tight quarter dungeons. Never knew it was around the corner. There was always a sense of immersion and fear. Yeah, I like mixes, right? Like, if you've got a mix, then you can establish the base feel of the game with maybe those more claustrophobic, as we've been saying, dungeons. Yeah, because there are those moments when you do want to be in the hall of the giant kings or whatever, right? And that'll feel good. But if everything's just giant, then that's not the feel. Pezzy said, I've never been into camp gameplay, but as a product of that design, it makes me feel like the area isn't just designed as a pretty replaceable challenge. I like when the area feels like it could be real. The castle could be a place the vampires are living, not just a series of boss fights. Yeah, agreed. I think there's also a tendency for us to superimpose our interpretation of what the reality of that place as we spend more and more time in it. If you're just running through, then you're not really thinking about that. Zube says, I remember there was this issue where PTR somehow was patched alive and people were buying all this stuff from merchants in POC. There was a rollback and ended up having double XP weekend as an apology. Ended up staying all weekend to level. I'm not shocked. Everquest says, when I was watching you put in Crocs, it was making me think of low-level croc camping in Oasis. Definitely some inspiration there. There'll probably be a few more things that get that feel. There's really something nice about being on that shoreline. Stabity13 says, I love the class diversity I saw on the website. How many of those are actually implemented so far? I believe every class is implemented to some degree at this point, but it's about iterating and fleshing out the full, like, kit that they have, etc. Isan said, I consider myself extremely hardcore gamer, yet compared to a meta gamer, my self-consciousness makes my ears ring. I play well over 100 hours a week in zero meta. Back in the day, it was called e-peening, but I'm pretty sure there's profanity somehow. No, I think people still talk about peens. Pazzy said, I like to approach my MMOs like it's a world to explore with my friends, and dungeons can be a part of that. Content like Mythic Plus doesn't do it for me, partly because I don't want to repeat the same content, but also because it's asking player base to look at a series of challenges to be understood instead of a place to learn about. But again, I think, you know, for a lot of players, that's what they're there for. It's just a matter of, are there outlets for someone like you that makes you, you know, where's the game for you? Where's the experience for you? Tarkov is kind of developing that community. Most are helpful and won't gank you and hide your gear if you're low level. Most people are helpful and recognize the noobs. There are people out there for this genre game. I believe so. I mean, Tarkov's a brutal experience, but most of what I've seen in the community, like the content creators and the comments and like chat and stuff during their live streams and everything, super nice. I mean, they're going to kill you, but, well, the bit that I played, which at this point is like a year ago now, but the community itself seemed pretty dope. Everquest says, well, I can tell you I plan on doing a yearly subscription at the Go to give it a super fair chance, just because the open nature of what you're doing here and of course the vision. Well, that's very kind of you. J Bombo said, higher level folks get something out of helping. It's one of the ways experiencing game not everyone will get to have. I do think there is something to that, right? Like there are the folks that are just focused on the business of being high end, and maybe they don't do it as much, but I've noticed a lot of like more casual or kind, I don't know what it is, like high end folks that really like spending time just buffing people and helping people, and can absolutely see the Croc area in Night Harbor West Gate being an Orc Hill style group camp for early levels. Yeah, we'll probably shape more of that as well. This cemetery out here is, I think it goes up to like level 9. It's like level 5 to 9 or something. And there'll be some stuff put in there. And then as we continue to flesh out the newbie yard, probably do some refining of the other newbie yard camps and shaded dunes. And then once we get the river bends in as well, and the city starts to be complete in terms of block out, we'll start to see new camps up here, both in the city, in the newbie yards, and then, you know, from that area out. But it's sort of iteration. First AVP said, some of my best memories from EQ 20 years ago were people taking the time to help you, give you something, answer questions, give you hints or tips, etc. People who saw you needed help. The cleric who would sit in unrest or miss more, buff and rest people. People who saw your corpse as they were going past and would see if you were online and needed a drag or a res. Free ports for CRs. The guy who saw you were a noob, gave you a fine steel weapon that was just plant to them, but great for you. Yeah, all of those things, right? That would be, you know, that's kind of the dream. Imagine an environment where there's enough cool shit that high level people are retained and they stay around and they enjoy doing the cool stuff. But the experience is such where we get that feel back. There is a lot of just opportunity for those people to engage with the rest of the community and help them out and show off, right? We need to make sure that we don't make a game where the power progression is so crazy that when people come in a year or whatever, they're like, I don't know how to ever get up here, and then all content's easily invalidated and all the other challenges that we have, everything gets crazy inflated. But on the flip side, we need to make sure that there's enough of a progression and enough variety of rewards and means of being able to convey your hard-earned, sort of like convey the amount of effort that you put into the game to everybody else, that it's worthwhile. Nicodemus had asked, I've heard of hardcore and casual gamer. What is a metagamer? Must be old again. Meta like the VR Facebook stuff? No. Esan said meta is an acronym, most effective tactic available. And then Pazzy said meta in quotes in a gaming sense means the current agreed best choice. A metagamer chooses their class based on what the community has determined is strong, chooses their gear based on what is determined to be best in slot. Or if you guys aren't familiar with it and you see BIS around, that's it. Now, and it got confused because when I was first coming into just working on games. The metagame, and it's still like the overlaps there, but the metagame was also strictly, no, it wasn't strictly. The metagame was frequently a discussion or a term applied to once you've hit kind of max level, what is the retention mechanism that retains people that are leading edge players, right? Define the elder game or the metagame. And it would be referencing loops that typically change from base game to essentially be new loops that were primarily geared at retention. Or I've got that wrong and I'm saying something silly. Either way. I went back to EQ for about a year or so ago, just for nostalgia. I was happy to see that there's still players, helping players just like in old days. Yeah, it's a really nice experience on a lot of the TLP servers. You see a fair bit of it. Had a shaman give you a stack of gate potions when you went back a bit ago. It was very kind of him. Where was that? Like, was it a live server or was it P99 or TLP? Yeah, it was always weird going back to live before I came back and then tried out TLP, just because I would go back and log into my character and every place that I knew was just empty. It's kind of a bummer. It wasn't until I started watching people streaming EQ that I was like, oh shit, there's still people.